Captain David Chen had seen death before, but nothing had prepared him for what floated before the bridge of the UES Phoenix. The mining colony of New Haven drifted through space like a broken toy, its massive industrial structures twisted into unrecognizable shapes. What had once been humanity's most prosperous asteroid mining operation now resembled a metallic graveyard, its hull sections peeled back like the petals of some grotesque flower. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The silence on the bridge was deafening. Chen's crew stared at their screens in disbelief as the Phoenix's sensors painted a picture of complete devastation. 40,000 people had called New Haven home. Scientists, engineers, miners, their families, an entire community that had taken decades to build, wiped out in what appeared to be a matter of hours. "Dear God," whispered Communications Officer Sarah Martinez, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's systems. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her console, searching for any sign of life among the wreckage. "Captain, I'm not detecting any survivors. The entire station's life support grid has been systematically destroyed." Chen felt his jaw clench as he absorbed the magnitude of what they were witnessing. New Haven hadn't just been attacked. It had been methodically dismantled. Every section showed signs of deliberate sabotage, as if whoever had done this wanted to ensure that not a single soul could survive. The precision of the destruction was almost artistic in its thoroughness. "Take us closer," Chen ordered, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his chest. "I want a full scan of the debris field. If there's any chance someone survived in an escape pod or shelter, we need to find them." The Phoenix glided through the scattered remains of the mining station, its hull occasionally scraping against floating chunks of metal and plastic. Through the bridge's massive viewport, Chen could see the personal effects of New Haven's residents drifting in the vacuum. Children's toys, family photographs sealed in protective cases, items that had once represented hope and dreams for families starting new lives on the frontier. Navigation Officer Michael Torres pulled up the station's last transmission logs, his face growing pale as he read the timestamps. "Sir, the final message was transmitted 18 hours ago. It was an emergency broadcast on all frequencies, but the signal was cut off mid-transmission. What did they manage to send?" Chen asked, though he dreaded the answer. Torres activated the playback system, and the bridge filled with the terrified voice of Colony Administrator Janet Walsh. Her words came through broken with static and background noise that sounded like explosions and screaming. "This is New Haven Colony to any ships in range. We are under attack by unknown vessels. They're not responding to our communications. Oh God, they're taking people. The attackers are boarding our civilian sections and dragging families away. They're not killing everyone. They're selecting specific individuals. Children, young adults, anyone who looks healthy and strong. This isn't a raid, it's a harvest. If anyone receives this message, warn Earth Command. Tell them the ships are massive, unlike anything we've ever seen. The hull designs are completely alien. They're using some kind of energy weapon that can cut through our barriers like they're made of paper. The gravity in Section 7 has been reversed somehow, and people are falling into space. They're not just destroying us, they're taking our people for slaves. We can't hold them off much longer. The defense grid is down, and..." The transmission ended abruptly in a burst of static that made everyone on the bridge wince. Chen stared at the communication console, his mind racing to process what they had just heard. This wasn't the work of pirates or raiders. Human criminals might steal cargo or demand ransom, but they didn't have technology that could manipulate gravity or slice through military-grade barriers. Whatever had attacked New Haven was far beyond anything humanity had encountered before. "Run a full-spectrum analysis on the debris," Chen commanded. "I want to know everything about the weapons that did this. Materials analysis, energy signatures, anything that might tell us who we're dealing with." Chief Science Officer Dr. Amanda Foster worked quickly at her station, her instruments probing the wreckage for clues. After several minutes of tense silence, she looked up from her readings with an expression of deep concern. "Captain, the damage patterns are consistent with directed energy weapons, but the power levels required would be enormous. Whatever ships attacked this colony were massive, probably 10 times the size of our largest battle cruisers. But there's something else." She paused, double-checking her readings. I'm detecting trace amounts of an unknown element in the blast residue. The atomic structure doesn't match anything in our database. This technology definitely isn't human. The implications hit Chen like a physical blow. Humanity had been alone in the galaxy for as long as they had been traveling among the stars. The discovery of alien technology should have been cause for celebration, the greatest moment in human history. Instead, it represented the greatest threat their species had ever faced. Are you certain about this, Doctor? Chen asked, though he already knew the answer from the grave expression on Foster's face. Absolutely certain. The energy signatures are completely foreign. Whoever attacked New Haven has weapons technology that's centuries ahead of ours. And based on the transmission we just heard, they're specifically targeting humans for enslavement. The Phoenix continued its grim survey of the destroyed colony, each new discovery adding another piece to a puzzle that Chen wished he didn't have to solve. In what had been the station's main habitat ring, they found evidence of systematic selection. Bodies of elderly residents and those with obvious health problems floated in the vacuum, while younger, healthier individuals were simply missing. The attackers had been choosing their slaves with the cold efficiency of livestock buyers at market. Captain, Martinez called from her station, I'm receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. Admiral Rebecca Stone wants to speak with you immediately. Chen straightened his uniform and activated the long-range communication system. The face that appeared on the main screen belonged to a woman in her 60s, her gray hair pulled back in a severe military style. Admiral Stone had spent 4 decades in the Colonial Defense Force, and her expression suggested she already knew why the Phoenix was calling. Captain Chen, Stone said without preamble, we've been monitoring your situation at New Haven. How bad is it? Total loss, Admiral. 40,000 people, and from what we can determine, at least half of them were taken alive rather than killed outright. This wasn't a standard attack. It was organized slave gathering by unknown hostiles with technology far superior to ours. Stone's expression darkened. Captain, I'm afraid New Haven isn't an isolated incident. We've lost contact with 4 other colonies in the past 72 hours. The pattern is always the same. Overwhelming force, systematic selection of captives, and complete destruction of infrastructure. We're dealing with something that sees human beings as a resource to be harvested. The bridge fell silent as the crew absorbed this information. 4 more colonies meant potentially 200,000 more people dead or enslaved. Chen felt a cold weight settling in his stomach as he realized the scope of what they were facing. Do we have any idea who's responsible, Admiral? We do now. Stone's image shifted as she transmitted a data file to the Phoenix. 3 hours ago, we received a transmission from the Kepler Deep Space Observatory. They detected the hostile fleet leaving the New Haven system and managed to get detailed scans before the ships entered hyperspace. The tactical display activated, showing the Phoenix's crew their first look at humanity's new enemy. The alien vessels were unlike anything in human design philosophy. Where human ships were built for efficiency and function, these were clearly designed to intimidate. Each ship was enormous, easily dwarfing the largest human battlecruisers, with hulls that seemed to be crafted from black metal that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Massive spines jutted from their surfaces, giving them the appearance of some deep-sea predator evolved for crushing prey. We're calling them the Dominion Fleet, Stone continued. Intelligence estimates suggest each of their capital ships carries a crew of at least 50,000. The smaller escort vessels are still twice the size of our destroyers. Captain, we're looking at a spacefaring civilization that's built for conquest on a galactic scale. Dr. Foster studied the ship designs with professional fascination mixed with horror. Admiral, the power requirements for vessels of that size would be astronomical. They must have energy sources we can't even imagine. How are we supposed to fight something like this? That's what we're trying to figure out, Doctor. Stone's voice carried the weight of someone who had spent sleepless nights grappling with an impossible problem. But there's more you need to know. The transmission from New Haven mentioned that the attackers were selecting specific captives. We've analyzed similar reports from the other lost colonies, and the pattern is clear. They're taking the young, the healthy, and the intelligent. This isn't random slave gathering. They're trying to acquire the best specimens humanity has to offer. Chen felt a chill run down his spine as the implications became clear. They're building a slave population designed to last for generations. Exactly. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And based on the speed and efficiency of their attacks, this isn't their first time doing this. Our xenobiology teams believe we're dealing with a species that has made enslaving other civilizations their primary method of expansion. They've probably done this to dozens of other species across the galaxy. The communication system chimed with an incoming priority message, and Martinez quickly routed it to the main display. The image that appeared made everyone on the bridge gasp in shock. It was clearly alien, a tall, thin creature with blue-gray skin and 4 arms that ended in hands with too many fingers. Its head was elongated and crowned with what appeared to be metallic implants that pulsed with a soft blue light. Most disturbing were its eyes, which were completely black and seemed to reflect no light at all. When the creature spoke, its voice was translated by the ship's computer into perfect English, though the tone carried an unmistakable note of absolute authority and contempt. "Humans of the vessel Phoenix," the alien said, "I am Overlord Vextar of the Dominion Empire. Your species has been evaluated and found suitable for incorporation into our labor force. Your colony at New Haven provided us with excellent specimens, as did your other settlements. We are pleased with the quality of human slaves." Chen found his voice, though every instinct told him to remain silent. "What gives you the right to attack our colonies and enslave our people?" The alien's expression didn't change, but Chen could sense amusement in its response. "Right is a concept for species that have the power to enforce it. Your species has built its small empire on the assumption that you are alone in the galaxy. This assumption was incorrect. The Dominion has been watching your expansion for decades, waiting for your population to reach sufficient numbers to be worth harvesting. We've cataloged your worlds, studied your defenses, and analyzed your capabilities. Your technology is primitive, your military force is scattered across dozens of systems, and your leadership is divided by the same tribal conflicts that have plagued your species since you first discovered fire. You are exactly the kind of resource-rich, poorly defended civilization that the Dominion specializes in acquiring." Dr. Foster stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "How many other species have you enslaved?" Vextar's 4 arms moved in what might have been a gesture of satisfaction. "The Dominion currently maintains labor populations from 47 different species across 12 sectors of the galaxy. Humans will be number 48. Some species, like the Altarians, provided us with excellent engineers and scientists. Others, like the Centauri, gave us strong physical laborers. Your species appears to offer a useful combination of intelligence, adaptability, and reproductive capacity. The process is quite simple," the alien continued with the tone of someone discussing a routine business transaction. "We identify a species at the appropriate level of development, advanced enough to be useful, but not so advanced as to pose a significant threat. We observe them until their population reaches optimal harvesting numbers. Then we collect the best specimens and eliminate the infrastructure that might allow the remaining population to pose future problems." Chen felt rage building in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. "And what happens to those you don't take?" "Those individuals who are too old, too weak, or too rebellious to make effective slaves are eliminated. We have found through experience that leaving survivors often leads to organized resistance movements that can become troublesome over time. Complete population replacement is much more efficient." The casual way Vextar discussed genocide made Chen's blood run cold. This wasn't a species driven by hatred or anger. They were conducting the systematic destruction of entire civilizations as a matter of economic policy. "However," Vextar continued, "we are not without mercy. Your species will be given the opportunity to surrender voluntarily. If your leadership agrees to our terms, we will limit our harvest to 90% of your population. The remaining 10% will be allowed to continue existing under Dominion oversight, provided they remain productive and compliant." Admiral Stone's voice cut through the transmission from Earth. "And if we refuse?" The alien's black eyes seemed to focus directly on the camera, and Chen could swear he felt its gaze even across the vast distance of space. "Then we will take 100% of your population by force, and your species will join the archaeological record alongside the others who chose resistance over pragmatism. The choice is yours, but you have very little time to make it. Our main fleet is already en route to your core systems. We estimate arrival at your homeworld in approximately 72 Earth hours. You may use that time to consider our generous offer or to prepare whatever pathetic defenses you believe might slow our advance. The outcome will be the same regardless of your choice." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the Phoenix in stunned silence. Chen stared at the blank screen, his mind struggling to process the magnitude of what they had just heard. Humanity had always assumed that their first contact with alien life would be a moment of wonder and discovery. Instead, they had encountered a species that viewed them as nothing more than inventory to be collected and sorted. "Admiral," Chen said finally, "what are our options?" Stone's expression was grim but determined. "Captain, I want you to return to Earth immediately. We're recalling every ship in the fleet for emergency counsel. If we're going to have any chance of surviving this, we need to mobilize every resource humanity has." "Do you really think we can fight them?" Martinez asked quietly. "Their technology is centuries ahead of ours." "I don't know," Stone admitted, "but I know we're not going to voluntarily hand over 90% of our species to alien slavers. If they want to enslave humanity, they're going to have to take us by force." As the Phoenix began its journey back to Earth, Chen found himself staring out at the wreckage of New Haven one last time. Somewhere among those twisted remains were the bodies of people who had been living normal lives just days ago. They had been planning for the future, raising their children, pursuing their dreams, all of it snuffed out by a species that saw them as nothing more than useful livestock. The journey to Earth took 18 hours at maximum hyperspace velocity, and Chen spent most of that time studying everything they knew about the Dominion fleet. The more he learned, the more hopeless their situation appeared. The alien ships weren't just larger than human vessels. They were fundamentally more advanced in every conceivable way. Their weapons could penetrate the strongest human shields as if they didn't exist. Their armor could withstand direct hits from humanity's most powerful missiles. Most disturbing of all, their technology seemed to be based on principles that human science barely understood. Dr. Foster had been analyzing the energy signatures from New Haven, and her findings painted a picture of a civilization that had mastered technologies humanity could only dream of. "Captain," she reported during one of their briefing sessions, "based on the residual traces I've found, their weapons appear to manipulate matter at the subatomic level. They're not just shooting energy beams, they're fundamentally altering the structure of whatever they hit." "What does that mean in practical terms?" Chen asked. "It means that traditional armor and shielding are essentially useless against them. They can probably disassemble our ships at the molecular level if they choose to. The only reason they left any recognizable wreckage at New Haven was because they wanted to send a message." Navigation Officer Torres had been studying the tactical implications of the Dominion's ship designs. "Even if we had comparable weapons technology, the size difference alone would make this an impossible fight. Our largest battlecruisers carry crews of maybe 2,000 people. Their smallest ships have crews 10 times that size. They could probably win through ramming attacks alone." Chen appreciated his crew's honesty, but he could see the despair beginning to take hold. "I understand the odds we're facing," he said, "but we can't give up before we've even tried to fight back. Maybe their technology is superior, but that doesn't mean they're invincible. Every military force has weaknesses, and our job is to find them." "With respect, Captain," Torres replied, "what weaknesses could they possibly have? They've been doing this for presumably centuries, enslaving dozens of species. If there were any obvious flaws in their approach, wouldn't someone have found them by now?" It was a valid question, and Chen didn't have a good answer, but as he thought about Vextar's casual arrogance, a possibility began to form in his mind. The Dominion had grown accustomed to easy victories over species that were completely unprepared for their attacks. They had developed tactics and strategies based on the assumption that their enemies would be weak, disorganized, and technologically inferior. "Maybe that's exactly the problem," Chen said slowly. "They're so used to fighting primitives that they've forgotten how to deal with real resistance. Every species they've conquered has probably rolled over after seeing their first demonstration of force." Dr. Foster looked skeptical. "Are you suggesting that humanity is somehow different from the other species they've enslaved?" "I'm suggesting that we might be the first species crazy enough to keep fighting even when we know we can't win." Chen stood up and activated the ship's intercom system. "All hands, this is the captain. I know you're all thinking about what we've learned over the past day. I know you're scared, and you have every right to be. We're facing an enemy that's technologically superior in every way imaginable. But I want you to remember something. Every bully in history has eventually run into someone who refused to back down. The Dominion thinks humanity is just another primitive species ready to roll over and accept slavery. They're about to learn that they picked the wrong species to threaten. We may not have their technology, and we may not have their numbers, but we have something they don't understand. We have the capacity to surprise them. And sometimes, that's enough to change everything. As the Phoenix dropped out of hyperspace near Earth, Chen could see the massive mobilization already taking place. Ships from every corner of human space were converging on the home system. Battlecruisers, destroyers, escort vessels, even converted civilian ships armed with whatever weapons could be mounted. Humanity was gathering every resource it had for the fight of its life. The sight of Earth's blue marble hanging in space filled Chen with a mixture of determination and protectiveness he had never felt before. Somewhere down on that planet were his parents, his sister, millions of people who were going about their daily lives unaware that their entire species was about to face extinction. The Dominion saw them as resources to be harvested, but Chen saw them as everything worth protecting in the universe. Admiral Stone's flagship, the UES Defiance, held position near the outer edge of the solar system, serving as the command center for humanity's desperate preparations. As the Phoenix docked with a massive command vessel, Chen could see the organized chaos of a military force preparing for war on a scale no human had ever imagined. The Defiance's main briefing room was packed with every senior officer in the Colonial Defense Force. Fleet Admiral Jessica Reynolds, the supreme commander of all human military forces, stood at the center of the room studying holographic displays that showed the approaching Dominion fleet. At 65, Reynolds was one of the most experienced military leaders in human history, having commanded forces during the border wars and the pirate conflicts. But Chen could see the strain on her face as she grappled with a threat unlike anything she had ever encountered. "Captains," Reynolds began as the room fell silent, "you've all seen the intelligence reports from New Haven and the other lost colonies. You know what we're facing. The question now is what we're going to do about it." Captain Elena Rodriguez of the UES Victory raised her hand. "Admiral, with respect, what can we do? Their smallest ships outgun our largest battlecruisers. This isn't a war, it's an execution." "Captain Rodriguez raises a valid point," Reynolds acknowledged. "In terms of raw firepower and technology, we're severely outmatched. But wars aren't always won by the side with the most advanced weapons. They're won by the side that's willing to pay the highest price for victory." Captain James Wright of the UES Thunder spoke up from the back of the room. "Are we seriously considering a direct military confrontation? Their fleet could probably glass every inhabited world in human space within a week." Reynolds activated a holographic display showing the current positions of both fleets. The human forces looked pathetically small compared to the massive Dominion armada approaching from deep space. "Captain Wright, you're absolutely right. In a conventional engagement, we would be annihilated within hours, which is why we're not going to fight them conventionally." The room buzzed with quiet conversation as the assembled officers tried to understand what their supreme commander was proposing. Reynolds waited for silence before continuing. "The Dominion expects us to either surrender immediately or mount a desperate but ultimately futile defense of our major population centers. They've seen this pattern dozens of times before with other species. What they're not expecting is a species willing to sacrifice everything for the chance to hurt them." Chen felt a chill as he began to understand where Reynolds was going with this. "Admiral, are you suggesting we abandon our colonies to focus on attacking their fleet directly?" "I'm suggesting something much more extreme than that, Captain Chen." Reynolds manipulated the holographic display to show detailed schematics of human ships and weapons systems. "Our scientists have been analyzing the energy signatures from the attacks on our colonies. While we can't match their technology, we've identified a potential vulnerability." Dr. Patricia Vance, the head of the Colonial Research Division, stepped forward to address the room. "The Dominion's weapons and shields operate on quantum manipulation principles that require enormous amounts of energy. Our analysis suggests that their ships generate this energy using controlled antimatter reactions on a scale we've never attempted. The advantage of this approach is that it gives them virtually unlimited power for their weapons and defenses. The disadvantage is that their ships are essentially flying bombs waiting to explode. If we could find a way to destabilize their antimatter containment systems, the implications hung in the air like a physical presence. Captain Martinez, who had served with Chen on the Phoenix, voiced what everyone was thinking. "You're talking about suicide attacks. I'm talking about the one advantage we have over every other species the Dominion has enslaved," Reynolds replied. "We're the first civilization they've encountered that's willing to die rather than submit. Every other species has eventually calculated that survival as slaves is preferable to extinction through resistance. Humans seem to be constitutionally incapable of making that calculation." Captain Rodriguez stood up slowly. "Admiral, even if suicide attacks could damage their ships, they still have enough firepower to sterilize every human world. What's the point of a victory that results in our complete extinction?" Reynolds smiled grimly. "Because extinction through resistance sends a very different message to the galaxy than extinction through enslavement. If we can prove that conquering humanity costs more than it's worth, we change the equation for every other species the Dominion encounters in the future. But more importantly," she continued, "our intelligence suggests that the Dominion's empire isn't as stable as they want us to believe. They're managing slave populations from dozens of different species across multiple sectors of space. That kind of empire requires constant expansion to maintain itself. If we can damage their fleet badly enough, we might trigger rebellions among their existing slave populations." Chen felt pieces of a larger strategy beginning to fall into place in his mind. "Admiral, are you saying our goal isn't to win this war but to make the cost of winning so high that it destroys their ability to maintain their empire?" "Exactly, Captain. We can't save humanity by defeating the Dominion in battle, but we might be able to save the galaxy by proving that some species are too dangerous to enslave." The room erupted in heated discussion as the officers grappled with the magnitude of what Reynolds was proposing. They were being asked to sacrifice their entire civilization for the chance to hurt an enemy that would continue to exist long after humanity was extinct. It was a level of strategic thinking that went beyond conventional military doctrine into something approaching philosophy. Captain Wright voiced the question that was troubling many of them. "Admiral, how do we know that damaging the Dominion fleet will actually help other species? What if we just delay their expansion by a few years?" Dr. Vance had been studying reports from the Dominion's conquered territories, and her findings painted a picture of an empire under more stress than their confident exterior suggested. "Captain, the Dominion's own communications intercepts suggest they're dealing with increasing levels of unrest among their slave populations. Several species have attempted coordinated uprisings in recent years, and the Dominion has had to divert significant resources to maintaining control. Their expansion isn't just about acquiring new slaves. It's about acquiring the resources necessary to control the slaves they already have. If we can force them to expend major resources conquering us, we might tip their entire system into collapse." Reynolds nodded approvingly. "The key insight is that the Dominion's empire is fundamentally unstable. They've built their entire civilization on the premise that they can continuously expand and acquire new resources to feed their existing population. If we can break that cycle, even temporarily, the internal contradictions of their system might do the rest of the work for us." Chen raised his hand. "Admiral, assuming we're committed to this strategy, what specific tactics are we considering?" Reynolds activated a new set of holographic displays showing human fleet positions and potential attack vectors. "We're going to divide our forces into 3 groups. The first group will engage their main fleet in what appears to be a conventional defense of Earth. This will draw their attention and make them commit their primary forces to a specific location. The second group will launch simultaneous attacks on their supply lines and support vessels. The Dominion fleet is massive, but that means it requires enormous amounts of supplies and maintenance. If we can disrupt their logistics, we might be able to force them into a more vulnerable position. The third group will execute direct assault missions against their capital ships, using ramming attacks designed to trigger antimatter cascade failures. Even if we only succeed in destroying a few of their largest vessels, the psychological impact on their command structure could be significant." The plan was audacious to the point of insanity, and Chen could see in the faces around him that most of the officers understood they were volunteering for a suicide mission. But he could also see something else, a grim determination that surprised him. Humanity had been caught completely off guard by the Dominion's attack, but they were adapting with characteristic stubbornness. There's one more element to consider, Reynolds added. Our xenobiology teams have been studying what we know about Dominion psychology. Like most successful predator species, they appear to have evolved strong hierarchical instincts. Their entire fleet is probably organized around the concept of absolute authority flowing from their command vessel. Dr. Vance continued the briefing. If we can identify and target their flagship, we might be able to create chaos throughout their entire fleet. Losing their supreme commander in battle might trigger command disputes that could work to our advantage. Captain Chen found himself thinking about his brief encounter with Overlord Vextar. The alien's supreme confidence had been both intimidating and revealing. The Dominion commander who contacted us seemed genuinely surprised that we were even considering resistance. They're so accustomed to easy victories that they might not be prepared for an enemy willing to accept massive casualties. That's our hope, Reynolds agreed. The Dominion has built their tactics around the assumption that their enemies will behave rationally. By definition, a species that chooses extinction over enslavement is not behaving rationally. That might give us the element of surprise we need. As the briefing continued, Chen found himself volunteering for the most dangerous assignment, leading one of the direct assault teams tasked with ramming Dominion capital ships. It wasn't a decision driven by heroism or bravado. It was simply the logical conclusion of everything he had learned about their situation. Humanity was facing extinction regardless of what they chose to do. The only question was whether their extinction would serve a larger purpose. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Ships were retrofitted with additional armor and explosive charges. Crews were briefed on techniques for maximizing damage during ramming attacks. Families said goodbye to loved ones who would never return home. Through it all, Chen was struck by the calm professionalism of humanity's military forces. They understood the odds they were facing, and they had chosen their path with full knowledge of its consequences. As the Dominion fleet entered the outer edges of the solar system, Chen stood on the bridge of his new command, a modified battlecruiser called the UES Retribution. The ship had been stripped of non-essential systems and loaded with enough explosives to level a small city. It was less a warship than a guided missile with a crew designed for one purpose: to get close enough to a Dominion capital ship to trigger a catastrophic antimatter explosion. Through the bridge viewport, Chen could see the approaching enemy fleet for the first time with his own eyes. The alien ships were even more intimidating in person than they had appeared in the reconnaissance images. Each vessel looked like it had been carved from a single block of obsidian, their surfaces drinking in light and radiating an aura of absolute menace. The flagship at the center of the formation was particularly imposing, a massive dreadnought that dwarfed everything else in space. "All ships, this is Admiral Reynolds," came the voice over the fleet communication system. "The Dominion fleet will be in weapons range in 6 hours. You know your assignments, and you know what's at stake. Today, humanity makes its final statement to the galaxy. Let's make sure it's one they never forget." Chen activated his ship's intercom to address his crew one last time. These men and women had volunteered for a mission they knew would cost them their lives, and he owed them honesty about what they were about to attempt. "This is Captain Chen," he began. "In a few hours, we're going to do something that no human crew has ever done before. We're going to ram our ship directly into the largest enemy vessel we can find, and we're going to detonate every explosive charge we're carrying in the process. It's not a plan that offers much hope for survival, but I want you to understand why we're doing this. The Dominion thinks humanity is just another primitive species ready to be harvested for slaves. They think we'll either surrender immediately or fight just hard enough to make ourselves feel better before we give up. They're about to learn that they fundamentally misunderstood what kind of species they decided to threaten. We may not survive the next few hours, but our actions today will echo across the galaxy for centuries to come. Every species the Dominion encounters in the future will know that some civilizations are too dangerous to enslave." That's not a bad legacy for a ship's crew. The crew responded with a mixture of grim determination and dark humor that Chen found oddly comforting. They were scared, he could see it in their faces, but they were also resolved. Humanity had chosen its path, and they would see it through to whatever end awaited them. As the Dominion fleet drew closer, Chen found himself thinking about his sister Emma, who lived in the New Tokyo Arcology on Earth. She was a teacher, dedicated to helping children learn about the wider universe. In a few hours, that universe would probably end for both of them. But maybe, somewhere among the stars, other children would grow up free because of what humanity chose to do today. The thought gave him peace as he prepared to lead his crew into their final battle. The UES Retribution shuddered as Dominion energy beams lanced through space around it. Captain David Chen gripped his command chair as his ship raced toward the massive alien flagship, its hull groaning under the stress of maximum acceleration. Around him, the final battle for humanity's survival raged across the solar system in a display of desperate courage that would have been magnificent if it weren't so utterly futile. Through the bridge viewport, Chen could see dozens of human ships engaged in hopeless combat with the Dominion fleet. The alien vessels moved through space like predators among minnows, their weapons systematically dismantling humanity's finest warships with contemptuous ease. The UES Thunder exploded in a brilliant flash as a Dominion destroyer's beam weapon carved through its reactor core. The UES Victory lasted 3 seconds longer before its hull was peeled apart by some kind of molecular disruptor that left its crew floating in vacuum. Distance to target? Chen called out as his ship bucked under another near miss. 15,000 kilometers in closing, reported Navigation Officer Lisa Park, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. The young woman had volunteered for this mission knowing it was suicide, and her calm professionalism in the face of certain death filled Chen with pride. "Captain," called Chief Engineer Tom Bradley from his station, "the Dominion flagship is launching interceptor craft. Looks like they finally figured out what we're trying to do." Chen watched as sleek alien fighters poured from the massive dreadnought's launch bays. The interceptors moved with impossible grace, their hulls shifting and flowing like liquid metal as they adjusted their configurations for combat. Within seconds, they were racing toward the Retribution, with weapons already charging. "All power to forward shields," Chen ordered. "Bradley, are the charges ready?" "Antimatter warheads are armed and ready for detonation on your command, sir. The cascade effect should destabilize their reactor core, even if we only manage to breach their outer hull." The first wave of interceptors opened fire, and the bridge lighting flickered as energy beams hammered against the Retribution's reinforced shields. Chen could hear the ship's defensive systems screaming warnings as power levels fluctuated wildly. His crew worked with mechanical precision, knowing that every second they brought them closer to their target. 10,000 kilometers, Park announced, as another interceptor strike sent shockwaves through the ship's superstructure. Chen activated the fleet communication channel, knowing this might be his last chance to speak with Admiral Reynolds. The tactical display showed that humanity's desperate gambit was failing across the entire battlefront. The Dominion had absorbed their surprise attacks and was now methodically exterminating the remaining human forces. "Admiral, this is Chen. The Retribution is making its final approach. Whatever happens next, it's been an honor serving with you." Reynolds' voice crackled through the static of battle. "The honor was mine, Captain. Give them hell." 5,000 kilometers, Park called out. "I'm reading massive energy spikes from the flagship. They're charging some kind of superweapon." Chen could see it now through the viewport. The Dominion Dreadnought's primary weapon array was glowing with contained energy that hurt to look at directly. Whatever they were preparing to unleash would probably vaporize the Retribution long before it could complete its ramming attack. That was when everything changed. The first sign was a ripple in space itself, visible as a distortion that seemed to bend starlight around its edges. Chen had never seen anything like it, and from the confused chatter on the communication channels, neither had anyone else in the human fleet. The distortion expanded rapidly, encompassing a volume of space larger than Earth's moon. "What the hell is that?" Bradley shouted from his station as new contacts began appearing on the sensor displays. Ships were emerging from the spatial distortion, but these weren't Dominion vessels. The newcomers were sleek and graceful, their hulls gleaming with a silver radiance that seemed to generate its own light. Where Dominion ships looked like weapons designed to intimidate, these vessels appeared almost organic, as if they had been grown rather than built. "Captain," Park said in amazement, "I'm counting over 200 new contacts. They're not broadcasting any identification signals, but their weapon signatures don't match anything in our database." The lead ship among the newcomers was an elegant cruiser that dwarfed even the Dominion flagship. As Chen watched, It began broadcasting on all frequencies in perfect English. Dominion Fleet. This is Commander Arya Thorne of the Liberation Alliance. You are hereby ordered to cease your attacks on the human colonies and withdraw from this system immediately. The response from the Dominion flagship was immediate and predictable. Overlord Vextar's voice cut through the communication channel with barely contained rage. Unknown vessels, you have no authority in this sector. The human species has been designated for harvesting by the Dominion Empire. Interfere with our operations and you will be destroyed. Commander Thorne's reply carried a note of grim satisfaction that sent chills down Chen's spine. Overlord Vextar, the Liberation Alliance has been tracking your empire's expansion for the past century. Today, your reign of terror ends. The battle that followed defied everything Chen thought he knew about space warfare. The Liberation Alliance ships moved through space like dancers, their weapons reaching out with beams of pure light that seemed to pass through Dominion shields as if they didn't exist. Where the light touched alien hulls, the dark metal simply ceased to exist, leaving perfectly spherical holes that grew larger with each passing second. The Dominion fleet, which had seemed invincible against human forces, suddenly found itself outmatched by technology even more advanced than their own. Their massive dreadnoughts fired desperately at targets that flickered in and out of existence, never quite solid enough to take damage but always present enough to deliver devastating attacks. "Captain," Park said in wonder, "the Dominion flagship is breaking apart. Whatever those weapons are, they're causing their antimatter containment to fail." Chen watched as the massive alien dreadnought that had seemed so threatening moments before began to tear itself apart from within. Secondary explosions rippled along its hull as critical systems overloaded, and the ship's intimidating black armor peeled away like burning paper. But it was the communication channel that truly revealed the scope of what was happening. Overlord Vextar's voice had lost all of its previous arrogance, replaced by something Chen had never expected to hear from a Dominion commander. Fear. "All units, emergency withdrawal. Repeat, all units withdraw immediately. We cannot match their technology." "Negative," came Commander Thorne's voice. "No Dominion vessel leaves this system. The galaxy remembers every species you've enslaved, every world you've destroyed. Today, we collect the debt." What followed was not a battle, but an execution. The Liberation Alliance ships hunted down Dominion vessels with methodical precision, their weapons carving through the most advanced technology humanity had ever encountered, as if it were made of cardboard. Chen watched in amazement as interceptors that had been shredding his ship moments before were reduced to glowing gas by beams of coherent light. "Captain," Chief Medical Officer Dr. Sarah Kim called from her station, "I'm detecting massive energy readings from the Liberation Alliance flagship. It looks like they're charging some kind of planetary-scale weapon." Chen followed her gaze to the tactical display, where the elegant alien cruiser was generating an energy signature that dwarfed anything the Dominion had brought to bear. But instead of targeting the remaining alien ships, the weapons seemed to be aimed at empty space. The answer came in the form of another spatial distortion, this one appearing near the edge of the solar system. As the rift stabilized, Chen could see through it to another star system entirely, one filled with massive industrial complexes and slave processing facilities that could only belong to the Dominion Empire. "All human vessels," Commander Thorne announced. "You are about to witness the liberation of the Kethvar system, where the Dominion has maintained slave populations for the past 3 centuries. This is what happens to civilizations that build their empires on the suffering of others." The weapon that emerged from the Liberation Alliance flagship was unlike anything Chen could have imagined. Instead of destructive energy, it projected what appeared to be pure information, a signal that passed through the spatial rift and spread across the distant star system like ripples on a pond. The effect was immediate and devastating, but not in any way Chen had expected. Instead of destroying the Dominion facilities, the signal seemed to awaken them. Across dozens of worlds, slave populations that had been subjugated for generations suddenly remembered who they had been before their enslavement. The uprising that followed was visible even from across the galaxy, as entire worlds erupted in coordinated rebellion. "The signal carries the genetic memories of every enslaved species," Commander Thorne explained, as the Liberation Alliance fleet finished destroying the last Dominion vessels in the solar system. It reminds them of their true nature, their original cultures, their reasons to fight. The Dominion's empire is built on the premise that enslaved populations will eventually forget their origins and accept their fate. Today, 47 species remember who they used to be. Chen found himself struggling to process the magnitude of what he was witnessing. In the span of an hour, humanity had gone from facing extinction to watching the collapse of a galactic empire that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. "Commander Thorn," Chen transmitted, "who are you? How did you know to find us here?" The response came with a warmth that Chen found oddly familiar. "Captain Chen, we are the descendants of the species the Dominion thought they had completely enslaved centuries ago. Every race they conquered, every civilization they destroyed, sent survivors into deep space before their worlds fell. We've been building our strength for 300 years, waiting for the right moment to strike back. But why now? Why risk everything to save humanity? Because you were the first species in recorded history to choose extinction over enslavement. Every other civilization, including our own ancestors, eventually calculated that survival as slaves was preferable to death as free beings. Your refusal to submit created a ripple effect across the galaxy that awakened something we thought we had lost forever: the will to fight for freedom regardless of the cost." As the Liberation Alliance ships began establishing orbit around Earth, Chen received orders to dock with the flagship for a formal meeting. The journey through the massive vessel's docking bay gave him his first close look at humanity's unexpected saviors, and what he saw filled him with wonder. The ship's crew was a mixture of species Chen didn't recognize, but all of them shared certain characteristics: a calm dignity that spoke of people who had endured unimaginable hardship and emerged stronger for it. They moved with purpose and efficiency, but without the cold arrogance that had characterized the Dominion forces. Commander Thorn met him personally in the ship's main briefing room, and Chen found himself face to face with one of the most remarkable beings he had ever encountered. She appeared to be humanoid, but clearly not human, with silver skin that seemed to glow with its own inner light and eyes that held depths of experience that suggested centuries of life. "Captain Chen," she said with a smile that transformed her alien features into something achingly familiar. "It's an honor to meet one of the architects of the galaxy's liberation." "Commander, I think you're giving us too much credit. We were about to be annihilated when you arrived." "That's exactly the point," Thorn replied. Every other species the Dominion encountered made rational calculations about their chances for survival. They weighed the costs and benefits and eventually chose submission over extinction. Humanity looked at exactly the same calculation and chose death before dishonor. That choice created a resonance across the galaxy that reawakened the fighting spirit in every enslaved population. For the first time in centuries, slaves across dozens of worlds began to believe that freedom was worth dying for. Your willingness to sacrifice everything for the principle of freedom gave them permission to do the same. Chen shook his head in amazement. "So our suicide mission actually worked, just not in the way we expected." "More than you know," Thorn confirmed. "The signal we broadcast to the enslaved worlds was based on quantum entanglement principles that link all sentient beings. Your decision to choose death over slavery created a psychic resonance that spread faster than light across the galaxy. Every slave population felt it at the same moment, and they understood instinctively what it meant. The Dominion's empire was always fragile because it depended on the passive acceptance of the enslaved. The moment those populations remembered that freedom was worth fighting for, the entire system became unsustainable. Your sacrifice triggered the largest coordinated uprising in galactic history." As Chen absorbed this information, he found himself thinking about his crew aboard the Retribution, and all the other human crews who had volunteered for suicide missions they believed would accomplish nothing more than making a defiant gesture. They had been prepared to die for a principle, never knowing that their sacrifice would literally liberate the galaxy. "What happens now?" Chen asked. "The Dominion Empire is collapsing, but there are still millions of enslaved beings across dozens of worlds." "Now comes the hard part," Thorn admitted. "Destroying an empire is relatively simple compared to building something better in its place. The Liberation Alliance has been planning for this moment for centuries, but we've always known that true freedom can't be imposed from above. Each species will have to choose its own path forward. But for the first time in 300 years, they'll have the chance to make that choice. And they'll have humanity's example to remind them that some things are worth dying for. Over the following weeks, as reports filtered in from across the galaxy, the true scope of the transformation became clear. The Dominion Empire hadn't just been defeated, it had been transformed from within. Former slave species were establishing new governments, forming alliances, and beginning the long process of rebuilding civilizations that had been suppressed for generations. Humanity found itself in the unexpected position of being regarded as heroes by dozens of species they had never met. Delegations arrived from across the galaxy to study the human concept of choosing death before dishonor, trying to understand how a relatively primitive species had accomplished what advanced civilizations had failed to achieve for centuries. But perhaps the most remarkable development was the discovery that humanity wasn't unique in their willingness to sacrifice everything for freedom. All across the galaxy, former slave populations were demonstrating the same stubborn refusal to accept subjugation that had characterized humanity's response to the Dominion threat. Captain Chen found himself assigned as humanity's first ambassador to the newly formed Galactic Council of Free Worlds, a position that required him to help coordinate the liberation efforts across dozens of star systems. It was challenging work, but it gave him the opportunity to see firsthand how the galaxy was transforming itself. The former slave species weren't seeking revenge against their oppressors. They were focused on building something better. The technology and knowledge accumulated by the Liberation Alliance over 3 centuries was being shared freely, lifting entire civilizations from subsistence to prosperity within a matter of months. Most importantly, the new galactic civilization being born from the ashes of the Dominion Empire was founded on a principle that humanity had demonstrated through their willingness to sacrifice everything. That freedom was not a privilege to be granted by the powerful, but an inherent right worth dying to protect. Chen often thought about the crews who had volunteered for suicide missions, believing they were throwing their lives away for nothing more than a gesture of defiance. They had died thinking their sacrifice was meaningless, never knowing that their willingness to choose extinction over enslavement had triggered the greatest liberation in galactic history. In the end, humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy wasn't their technology or their military prowess. It was their stubborn insistence that some principles were more important than survival itself. That lesson, learned through humanity's darkest hour, became the foundation upon which a new age of galactic freedom was built. The alien tyrant who had enslaved worlds had indeed tried to enslave humanity. But in doing so, he had awakened something in the galaxy that no empire could contain. The irrepressible desire for freedom that burns in the heart of every sentient being. And sometimes, that desire is stronger than the fear of death itself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.